had been a long day. The kind of day it had been yesterday. The kind of day it probably would be tomorrow. But what the heck? That's the life of a private investigator. The city lights were just starting to push through the twilight that snuck up on me again when Vera knocked on my door. A couple of clients needed to see me tonight. The days were getting longer all the time, but what else did I have to look forward to? The taste of a cold beer and the sizzle of a New York sirloin, medium rare, still danced in my mind as Vera led the Forresters into my office. I offered them a seat, and Vera the chance to go and see her boyfriend. The tale that the Forresters told sounded all too familiar. Another sign of the festering sore on the body of our society. Someone had stolen their baby. But before my fist had the time to hit the desktop in disgust, Mr. Forrester went on to correct his wife's story. Their baby hadn't exactly been stolen. In fact, it hadn't exactly been born. It was just missing. Missing from their lives. I was about to write this one off, but there was something in Mrs. Forrester's eyes, a soft pleading in her voice, that kept me listening. Since I already believed her story, I wondered if Mr. Forrester could stand up to the test. He answered all my questions without the slightest quiver in his determined voice or the briefest flinch in the steadfastness of his eyes. By the time they left me to ponder how to find their baby, a baby that didn't really exist, the rhythmic sounds of a little jazz club next door were already pulsing the too bright neon sign to life. The night world of fantasy had the city by the throat, and I had only a few slippery facts to try to hold on to. But there was something about this case, something important, something that made me promise to look into it. And who am I? I'm Spud O'Reilly, the best PI in the city. And besides, the rent was due. That next morning sun sliced through my car windshield and halfway through my head before I got to the offices of Mrs. Forrester's doctor. I knew that the pain in my head was no way to start a day, but I didn't know that it was about to get worse. Since I hadn't made an appointment, I was left to cool my heels in the waiting room. Finally, I was summoned into the office. From the look of the doc as I walked in, he must have spent all of his free moments honing the edges of his crisp white lab coat. Spending 20 minutes with that guy was like spending 20 minutes alone. He was definitely hiding something from me. As I asked him about Margot Forrester's condition, I found his answers like pulling ice cubes out of a self-service freezer, cold and pre-packaged. He wanted no misunderstandings. He had done everything that he could for Mrs. Forrester. He followed all the normal procedures, required all the normal tests, but only got back normal lab results. The problem wasn't his. Mrs. Forrester was just another clomiphene failure. Too bad. The office door closed as hard in my face as my mind did to ideas as to where I should go with this case next. There was only one place. The same place I always go to think. Lou's. I've been sitting there a long time, looking down into a dark pool of Mississippi Delta mud, when I heard another brave soul belly up to the bar and order the same. He was a young guy, early 30s, business suit, an intelligent-looking sort, except that he was sitting there mumbling to himself. He looked very familiar. By the time I placed him, he was asking me if I had any better luck with the good doctor than he did. Now I knew where I had seen him. But what was a guy like him doing in an OB-GYN's office? Turns out he was a pharmaceutical rep from a company called Sandoz. For almost 9 months he had been trying to see the doctor, to tell him about a drug named Parladel, and how it can solve many of his patients' problems with infertility. In a few short minutes, this rep had provided me with all of the information that I needed to help the Forresters. Case closed. Or almost. Whenever we think about them, it's the details that separate the good from the exceptional. Follow-up, persistence, always going that extra mile to give the client what he needs. That's what makes me what I am. The best. For the Forresters, it meant that I had spent 2 extra days doing grunt work and 1 final call on their OB-GYN. After blowing the whistle on the good doctor for premeditated infertility and failure to prescribe, I called the Forresters in for our last meeting. The only thing I love more than a good time is a happy client. And I had 2 of them beaming back at me over a desk littered with overdue notices. They had brought me a tough case, and I solved it. And in my travels, I found that this case wasn't just an isolated case, but what could be described as a conspiracy of ignorance. There is a new infertility story to be told, but many doctors aren't listening. Fortunately, thanks to the hard-working types like me and that Sandoz rep, the story is getting out. We are turning hopes into reality for many happy couples.